Welcome to the Power of Design podcast. My name is Jack Osa. I'm an architect, born and raised in Colombia, South America. Years ago, I migrated to the United States to follow my dreams. And today, I'm the founder and principal of Osa Studio, a multidisciplinary architectural design firm in Charlotte, North Carolina. In this podcast, we talk about design, business, creativity, and the inspiration we need to create an exciting and powerful built environment. In today's episode of the Power of Design podcast, I'm having a great conversation with Jason Hlewicki and Jared Hoeflich from Swinerton Construction in Charlotte, North Carolina. Hey, welcome to another episode of the Power of Design podcast. I'm here in a very beautiful office. This is the Swinerton Construction office in Charlotte, North Carolina, and I'm here with my friend Jason Hlewicki and his partner Jared Hoeflich. How are you guys this morning?
Doing great. Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thanks, Jack. Thanks so much for putting it together.
Sure. Well, I'd like to start by learning more about you guys, your story. I'd love to learn about what you guys are doing here in Charlotte with your business, your community. So, Jared, why don't you tell me about, where are you from? Where did you grow up and that professional path that took you here today?
Sure. I kind of grew up in the construction world, so to speak. My dad was a smaller residential builder in Ohio, and sort of presumed I would go to school and then build that business, and quickly realized that wasn't gonna get it done for me. So I'm the oldest of four, and my two brothers were all work for very large commercial construction outfits. So it's been kind of fun to play with that and share that in common with my brothers. But moved to Colorado very early in my career with a different large commercial contractor that I respect a lot and still have contacts and friends with. But it's been a fun ride. Took a little bit of a break from general contracting at one point in my career to be on the development side.
Oh, interesting.
And I think that's it's given me perspective that's really valuable in my career today. But yeah, I moved here with my family 3.5 years ago, and excited about expanding our reach and our brand here in the Southeast. So
awesome.
It's been a good ride.
What do you think was the most valuable lesson you learned in the development experience you had?
I think the broader picture, right? Understanding that there's a lot of things that have to be considered, right?
Yeah.
And to be honest, it was a little bit. It was fun to have influence over the product that we don't have quite as much,
right?
Especially in a typical, design, bid, build solution, or even when we're at the table during pre-construction, you have some influence over what the product is going to be. But
sure,
it was fun to exercise that muscle a little bit with this space,
yeah.
Right? To think about, how it was going to function and how it was going to best suit our needs, not just today, but 5 years from today.
Sure. And, that's why I started the podcast, the power of design. And the power of design is the intersection of three circles: construction, design, and real estate. Because at the end of the day, drawings get just to some point, but drawings are not space, are not experience. Mm-hmm. Construction is just interpreting, looking at somebody else's design, making it happen, but then somebody needs to make a deal, create a financial viable strategy out of a project. There's going to be a banker involved, but all those people are involved in creating the power of design. And what I've seen is that in our community, sometimes we're so separated in our own silos, and the idea of the podcast was to kind of bring everybody together to have deeper conversations on what we do every day. Yeah it's been good to, from that, sort of really have it anchored that construction's a team sport. Yeah, right. That we all have to do our part, respect the team and the different roles, and if we do that in a way that shows true partnership, I think the result reflects that. Thanks. Well, Jason, thank you so much for coming, man. I know we've been trying to make this happen for a while, and I'm very excited to have you here. We've been friends for a while, and I'm really admire everything that you're doing. So please tell us about your story.
Yeah, no, thanks, Jack. It has been a long time coming, and I'll look in the mirror and take some ownership on extending the period that we've sat and had this conversation. But super excited to be here and grateful for the opportunity. So, just a little background on me, as you can probably tell, and most of your listeners from my northern accent. I grew up in the Northeast, product of a blue-collared town up in Westchester, New York. Much like Jared, I got involved at a very young age in construction. In fact, it's a funny story, but there was somebody in the neighborhood that decided they were going to build their own house. And I think I was probably about 12 years old, and I was just intrigued at the idea that somebody could undertake a project of that magnitude.
Yeah.
Especially at the age of 12, watching somebody build their own house. But I was just amazed at the way that the guys worked with their tools and the efficiencies and how it all came together and the engineering that went into the building. And essentially just asked if I could work for, I think it was $0.25 or $1 a day, just sweeping up floors after the framing crews. And then, just as the life cycle of that project went, I kind of just took some advice my dad gave me a long time ago, is that you have, 2 ears and one mouth, and that means you should use the other two twice as much as the one. So I quietly watched and learned and just quickly grew a passion for it. Much like Jared, I also threw my hat into the ring on the owner's side. I worked under an asset development company up in New York, actually in the tri-state area, New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut, where I worked on the owner's side and saw what it was like to sit in that chair, and it's given me a deeper understanding of the conversations that I currently have across the table and put on that mindset. So, it was super enjoyable to work up in the Northeast. Primarily, my professional career has been handled in New York City. I worked for a small family-owned general contractor at first, after I moved out of the asset management and property management role, and performed commercial interiors and renovation work for a few years for that company, and then just had my sights set on a little bit bigger bite of the apple, no pun intended, in New York.
Yeah.
But went to a national general contractor. Worked for them for a total of 20 years, 8 up in New York and 12 here locally. So I've been in the Carolinas for 15 years, a little bit more than 15 years, in a very similar capacity and role where I've kind of run special projects and commercial interiors. And I joined Swinerton in the summer of 2019. Jared and I connected and I guess we could say courted each other for quite some time, which honestly, it sounds funny, but I valued that process. And the reason I did was, and then I've learned that in 2.5 years, is the way that Swinerton and Jared specifically like to do work is it's to gain a deeper understanding of the individual, what they bring to the table, how there could be complementary strengths and weaknesses. And it really has made the last 2.5 years super enjoyable to be here.
That's awesome. That experience working in New York, I'm curious to know what you think about, how different it is culturally, the way we behave, we do business. And I'm asking because, where I used to work, I had to do a couple of projects in New York. Mm-hmm. Was doing remote from here, but when I joined calls with contractors and owner, it was not as nice as we're used to here in the South.
Sure.
People
full contact.
I was very aggressive. I was like, oh my God, dude, you don't have to be like that.
Yeah.
And but later on, I started thinking, well, for some reason, at least here in Charlotte, our community, we're always very calm.
Mm-hmm.
We always have problems. We solve it. We're looking for the owner. But that was not the case in those calls I had. So is that common or what do you think?
I would say it is. I would say maybe not as common as it was 15 years ago. So, one of the things about New York 15 years ago, it was very union strong. And there's just a different atmosphere centered around the unions and a right to work state, which is North Carolina. So I certainly was reminded quite often when I first made the transition down here that I'm not in New York anymore, and that things are done at a different pace and just in a different way. And to be honest with you, I don't miss the New York hustle and bustle. To be, completely transparent on this podcast, the main reason I moved out of New York was to be a better father and a better husband. Quite honestly, it was to be able to pull back and not catch a 5:50 a.m. train and then catch an 8 p.m. train on the way home, because you were just in that environment that you were grinding at 100%, and things that shouldn't have actually sacrificed, right? So it was just a personal decision that I made, and today I'm certainly looking in the rearview mirror, being very thankful that I did it. Probably could have done it a little bit earlier, but father of 2 daughters and married 25 years, and super grateful that I did make that choice. And New York is still, we opened a New York office in June of 2021 for Swinerton, and certainly have lent my hand in what I could as far as opening doors and creating relationships and identifying talent for some of our employee ownership up there, and I've been grateful. But I can tell you, going back for just a couple of days, I was so happy to return back to Charlotte. And I mean, as we all know at this table, working in the Charlotte commercial real estate sector is exciting. It's energetic. The future is bright, and it's really where I want to be.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. I had a guest on another podcast about 2 months ago, and he talked about the difference between standard of living and quality of life. Mm-hmm. That sometimes we set up a standard of living, living in a certain way, but that's not really quality of life. Quality of life is what you mentioned, being more time with your family, enjoying what you're doing, using work to achieve your personal goals versus being a producing machine that you're just cranking up work, but are you really living? Is that quality of life? And yeah, there is a point where I will think is with age that you get to the realization to understand what are the real priorities in life. Mm-hmm. Yeah,
for sure.
So there are 3 things that I know about Swinerton, because it's new to me. I didn't even know about Swinerton until you joined and you talked to me about it, introduced me to the company, and it's been very fascinating what I've been learning about. So, one thing that I like is, 132-year-old company, so that means a lot. Mm-hmm. The other thing is about being an employee-owned company. That's a huge differentiator. And the other thing that I like a lot about is the innovation and technology aspect of how you guys embrace that. So, Jared, can you talk to me about the company overall? How has been your experience, and what do you think are those key differentiators you guys bring to the marketplace?
Sure. So I started with the organization 10 years ago last week, actually, and in our Denver operation. And when I first got to Swinerton, I remember somebody suggesting, actually it was a mentor that I've worked with for my entire career, a guy named Scott Conrad. And he hired me at Swinerton. He's hired me every time I've been hired since college, but it's nice. Not a long list, but some of us learned from our mistakes. Not Scott, not so much. But yeah, so when I came to Swinerton, I remember Scott telling me that there's a really entrepreneurial feel at Swinerton, and to be honest, I didn't believe it. Right. That wasn't very high on my list at the time of priorities, but I didn't believe it. Because, like you say, the company was founded in 1888, and at the time, I think we were $3.5 billion. And I didn't buy it, but I think that entrepreneurial spirit shows up in ways that I wasn't looking for, I wasn't listening for, right? Timber Lab, right, is our mass timber group, right, and that was really born out of a couple of years ago, a couple of really smart people that we love doing business with that are, having them on our team that are in Portland, and seeing mass timber coming as a priority as a structural system in commercial real estate. And so that's a way that entrepreneurialism shows up, right? Is that we have people that are passionate about a thing, go support it. So that's been fun. But we're 21, I think, offices now. My responsibility is for our operation in Atlanta, in the Carolinas, both Charlotte and Raleigh office, but really with the goal that we're going to work to establish the relationships to support a network of offices here in the Southeast. So over time, we'll increase our presence in Greenville, I suspect, and really just work to build the right network of offices here in the region. But yeah, it's been fun to bring certain things that I feel like aren't as widely available here as they may be in some of the other markets that we serve.
Yeah.
You mentioned technology specifically. That's one of the selling differentiators that I believe we offer the marketplace here. Practical technology, right? Not just technology for the sake of, something flashy to talk about at an interview, but adding value, right? So one of the things we've done most recently is Dusty, right? The robotic layout setup, and it's pretty quickly adding value, right? We're not just babysitting it; it's actually adding value.
Right.
So that's just one example, but it's fun to bring a more concerted effort to that than I think we see often here. And then another thing is, it wasn't on your list, but delivery systems, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm anxious to see design build as a delivery system take off to a greater extent here in the Carolinas, in the Southeast, period. But other tools that we have at Swinerton are P3 relationships with Griffin Swinerton that we can bring to bear if the project would benefit from that sort of a relationship. And then we also have a development arm. It's by no means meant to compete with our partners and those that we work for, but for smaller development shops that have a good vision, but need the balance sheet and a partner to come alongside and help make a deal happen. So we're getting ready to tee up our second development deal here in Charlotte. Much more significant undertaking than the first, but it's been really fun to be able to do that, right?
Nice.
And to establish our relationships, and patience is not my strong suit, but been working to really be thoughtful about the way that we make relationships here in Charlotte for the long term, right? It's not the revenue and what we do in 20 and 21 and 22 is far less the issue than what we want to become in 2030.
Awesome. How about you, Jason? What's your role here in the Charlotte office, and how do you see, the future of the office, and also, I've been very impressed with all the work that you have done this short, 2 or 3 years,
Right.
but I know that's not, an overnight success. You've been in this community for many years doing a lot of work. So I know that's all capital that you've been banking on for years.
Sure.
And looks like now is the time to make big things happen.
Yeah. So from a surface level, my title is Director of Special Projects and Commercial Interiors. What does that mean? Obviously, commercial interiors is pretty self-explanatory. Special projects tends to be a little bit of a gray area for some folks, but essentially it would be considered single story out of the ground or adaptive reuse or something that has some sort of uniqueness to it. I don't necessarily go too much on the vertical side. I've got a really good partner in Kevin Smith here in the office. He's also part of the leadership team that focuses on that, and certainly we do that together when appropriate, right? So one of the things that Kevin and I work on, along with Jared's leadership, is just breaking down the traditional silos of a special projects group and a buildings group and a mass timber group. We tend to mix it up, and again, I think that kind of stems back to this employee ownership model, where if it makes sense and it lends itself to something that increases the potential for Swinerton as a partner, where I bring to the table, then I'll come to the table with Kevin and sell a vertical high rise.
We have a cultural priorities document that we've rallied around, and one of them is what's good for anyone in the building is good for everyone in the building.
That's right. That's right.
And so Jason and Kevin have done a really nice job of building consensus that just makes it easy to not be territorial, right? So
Yeah.
they're peers on a little bit different sides of the house, but where we carve out, who's going to take lead on a project or a pursuit is irrelevant as long as a team we succeed. So
Right.
it's been
That's
good.
right. And I think that also carries over into, not with revenue growth, right? You have to have talent and resource growth, right? It has to parallel each other. Otherwise you can get out of sequence pretty quickly. And I would say that, the three of us have done a really nice job of increasing our talent pool here and holding the bar very high at who we bring in and at the right time and for the right reasons. So I think, not only just running the operations of a special projects or a commercial interiors group, but also, there's that BD component that we talked about of breaking down those silos of going after appropriate projects together. But it's also the identification of true talent and understanding the who, the why, and the what, and certainly the when, right? That's super important from a business owner's perspective. And I think Jared, myself, and Kevin all possess the fact that, even though our name is not hanging on the door, it's our business to run. And that's to me is very refreshing.
Yeah. So on the talent, retaining talent, acquiring talent, what do you think, Jared, are the maybe top 2 or 3 skills of like a really good professional unit that is not their experience, what they know how to do? What are those soft skills that you think are hard to find that they really make a difference?
It's a softball for me, man.
Well, I do like the way that he asked the question as far as, don't tell me about the hard.
Well, and
give me the soft.
Agree. And that's where I will always go, right?
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
I was part of a recruiting retention group corporately a few years ago, and we had a handful of really type A people that were already leaders in our organization that had come together, and the thing we decided to tackle in Portland that day was job descriptions. They were 20 years old and talked about finger dexterity. And I'm not kidding. That was really on there.
Physical
got your
capabilities.
finger dexterity. But we pretty quickly threw everything away and we went to the drawing board about what is it that we care about? Like what makes, as a contractor, I believe that all we have to offer to our partners, what we're selling is our people, right?
Yes.
And so we started working to identify and peel that back a little bit. Like, what is it that makes us excellent in that area? And no skills, right?
Right.
Zero skills, zero technical competencies showed up until like hour 3, right? And so we're really just finding, and what we realized is it's all about the attributes. So the result of that over a 1.5 year period was that team under the leadership of our now CTO, Lauren Nunnally, is a product called Career Blueprint. And it really sort of maps out, starting with attributes, right? Right out of the gate, the first 2 pages is all about attributes. And it's a really nice sort of waterfall that helps our team manage their career of the things that are important to us, right?
Yeah.
At a very high level, recruiting is one of the things that I'm most passionate about, right? I got into the business because I like to build, right? To see the result of the effort. Now what I'm much more satisfied by and passionate about is building the team, right? So coming to Charlotte with a brand, right? With this large company backing what we do here locally. But really having the latitude to do things that the community's asking for, right?
Yeah.
And to then set it up in a way that is thoughtful, right? So we've got what I call franchise players, right? We had Kevin Smith move from our Hawaii operation 2 weeks after I came, and Lonnie Grattan came here 6 months later from Denver. And then we hire local top talent, right? With, partnering with Jason, who's got local, relationships and perspective and brings that to bear. And then you put Thomas and Andy and others on the team, also local, and really blending those franchise players with top local talent. But the common theme with all those is high communication capacity.
Yeah.
Leaders, right? That you can see leadership.
Yes.
But then competitiveness, right? And I laugh about how I don't really care how that competitiveness shows up. It doesn't have to be my brand of competitive,
Right.
as long as there's competitiveness that shows up, in that candidate. I think that's what we're looking for.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's fun to do though.
The Power of Design podcast is brought to you by OSA Studio, a multidisciplinary design firm focused on creating impactful experiences through the power of design. We partner with our clients to create buildings, interior spaces, brands, and strategies that help you deliver a successful project. As a minority-owned firm, we are committed to building a diverse platform of curious and driven design professionals so we can together pursue our full potential. For more information, please visit us at www.osastudio.com.
Yeah, what will you say, Jason, about communication? Because, we say communication, but it's just a big, broad word.
Sure.
But what specifically? Because there are many things, and I'm asking because there might be a lot of people listening to the podcast, little people that want to follow, a path similar to you guys, want to equip themselves with more soft skills. Mm-hmm. But what specifically about communication do you think is key that is not very common?
Yeah. So one of the things I always like to say is and it's never been described, well, I shouldn't say never, but in the early stages, I was super guilty of this, is having transparent communication without ego, right? And coming out of the Northeast, that was a hard thing for me to understand.
Right.
I was born and bred in the field operations that ego had a lot to do with the way you were perceived.
Right.
And I've learned over the years some hard lessons, some not so hard lessons, but nonetheless, I've come to the understanding that, and I do truly believe the guys that Jared has mentioned possess this, is that they have that full transparency in communication without ego. And what I mean by that is, whether it's talking about budgets, whether it's talking about constructability, whether it's talking with other design professionals in our corporate real estate network here, in a manner that is professional but truthful, right? And sometimes people don't like the truth, but it needs to be communicated in a way that starts a meaningful conversation. And truthfully, that's what communication should lend itself to, is a meaningful conversation that continues the overall goal of whether it's a project or the conversation at hand. And to me, I think our folks, when we look at talent, we look at, do they possess those skills? And quite frankly, I feel like all of our folks do. And that was important for me to see, right? I'd rather be able to coach and mentor on the operational side, because that's a comfort zone for me. And I think it is for Jared as well. And I would say it's the same thing for Kevin Smith. It's harder to teach these soft communication skills, the respect skills, the what makes people professionals, right?
Right.
We can get to the learning curve on the other items, but the communication is key, and certainly consistent and thorough conversation is the back end of that, right? So there's the transparency, but you've got to be consistent. And I say a lot of times, own the process, because you are an owner, right? Swinerton lends itself under the employee model is you're an owner. So own the process. And when it comes time to pull in resources like myself or Jared or some of the other employees, be honest and say, look, I don't know what I don't know.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, so, that's one of the things that I find interesting about Jared is he's very complimentary with me in things like the development arm side, the mass timber side, the multifamily side that I have not had exposure with. So I tend to maybe over communicate the wanting to know more, right? And I think there's our entire staff wouldn't be afraid to raise their hand and say, I don't think I know where we need to go. How do we get there?
Sure.
How do we get there?
Yeah, and it's interesting because I think communication is one of those things you're never gonna be a master. You always have something else to learn, something else to learn. And as you mentioned at the beginning, we have 2 years. We need to listen more. And one of the things I notice today with younger professionals is sometimes they go like full speed, and when you communicate something, they just keep going. Like, okay, did you really grab? Did you really listen? And that's hard. I'm reading something about reflective listening, and there is a good book called Never Split the Difference. And they talk about do negotiations and how to communicate, and just the simple fact when somebody tells you something, you repeat it back to them. Like don't analyze it, don't react to it. Repeat it back, even using the same words. Immediately that helps the person feel that they're heard. They're more comfortable. But it's so hard because I think by nature, especially as men and in the construction industry, we're so problem-solving oriented that we want to improve it, make it better, come up with the solution. But sometimes we don't realize that the price we're paying for that is maybe the other person does not feel, that they matter. And even subconscious, they may not even know, they don't feel good about this conversation. So that's something I'm working on myself to be more aware of how the other person is feeling when I communicating with them, and making sure that feeling is okay. I matter because what I said, somebody listened to this. So yeah, that's interesting.
Something you said a second ago reminded me of a really valuable lesson I learned going on 10 years ago now. We've got a series called Leader Builder at Swinerton, and I went in a previous generation. It's been renovated since, but I realized through this course that in the first half of my career to date, I was real caught up in solving problems. Right, would quickly take that on, and I wanted to, especially maybe in my communication with ownership groups or developers, I wanted to acknowledge the situation or the problem or the thing when I had a pretty good idea what the right answer was going to be. Right. And I realized 10 years ago that's the wrong plan. Right. So now the plan is there's no the phrase was no surprises unless it's a gift. So now I'm on the way to deal with the thing, and I'm going to call my partners and tell them, and it's really turned into an ability to build trust through a situation, right? Because those situations are going to happen. It's just a matter of what we do with it, right? So to be transparent about it, right? To call the partner and say, here's the thing that just happened. Precast piece cartwheeled into the street.
God
that doesn't happen
forbid.
again. But, and so, we're going to deal with it, but you need to know. And I'll call you back as soon as I've got more information, or we will find a solution, right? And you'll be whatever the issue is. But it really kind of changed how I looked at problem solving and the burden of that, and created an opportunity to gain trust through the situation that comes up.
Sure,
so,
and
cool.
Over communication is always the best solution. Default to over communicate. Yeah. Because the more information you give the other person, the more they have to understand what's going on.
Sure.
Yeah. And, one of the things I've been thinking about lately, always in that topic, is sometimes we want to solve things because it gives us peace. It's like closure. But I think the older I get, the more comfortable I become without closure, without answers, and more comfortable with open questions. Like, it's okay if just talk to the question and keep going, but at some point the solution will be there at the right time. But yeah, that's interesting.
I think, Jack, that's good advice, not only for your professional life, but personally too, right? Especially, as hard charging alpha males, in relationships, like it's hard sometimes to not have to give an answer. Right. So I look at it as improvement on both professional and personal sides.
Yeah, especially, just looking at, your own home, your relationships, relationship with my wife is the same thing.
Very much so.
If you just master those skills at home, they're naturally going to default in your workplace. And I think that's one of the interesting things to me about, professional, personal development, that you gain all these skills in your own life. And sometimes I learn it through trying to be better at work, but somehow I become a better person at home just by default, because you're making that effort to change and improve. So one of the things I like to know about each of you is, I consider both of you high performance professionals. How do you personally keep growing, keep learning, evolving? How do you take care of your mind, your body, your family? What are those things that along the years you realize they're key to become a better person?
Be careful what question you ask, Jason.
Yeah. I can tend to go off the deep end, especially from the physical standpoint. But it's a really good question. I think it starts with the realization of, no matter how long you've been in the business, no matter how much you've been exposed to, and whether it's large, dense populated markets like in New York, there's plenty that you don't know, right? And being humble and understanding that you're going to learn something new every day, and actually engage your mind to do so, right? So we're doing a podcast here, and I listen to a lot of different podcasts, and I actually force myself. It's active engagement to force myself to listen to opposing views of positions that I have, right? We all have our unconscious bias, and
that's huge.
I certainly will force myself to listen to other views just to try to gain an understanding. Not to say that I want to change my views, because we all have our views, and we feel like they're grounded in some reality and opinions, and the way that we grew up, right? So, but it's also good as I've gotten older to understand that there are 2 or 3 sides to issues, but recognizing that you need to understand them, because a lot of times when you do, I think that helps you answer some questions or communicate better. We don't have to agree on everything, right? But where things break down is when the communication stops. And that's where I get caught up, is whether it's in business or professionally, it's understanding that continued communication without the negative energy and the angst that comes with what we see a lot of today is important, right? You have to have that. That's the mind side. The physical side, Jared and I talk about a lot of, health and wellness, and whether it's physical fitness or nutritional, saturations, and we can go on, we can do a podcast on that alone, but I think one goes hand in hand, right? If you take care of yourself mentally and physically, they complement each other. When one lags behind the other, I think you can run into problems.
My mind went a little bit different place when I heard that question.
Go there.
And so I think, early in my career, I don't know, I've struggled with this throughout. Like I'm pretty aggressive, hard charging, committed, like what I do, which makes it easy to put a lot into it. And I think, especially early in my career, I felt like you could grind through it, right? Yes. And that more time at the desk meant a greater chance of success. What I've learned since is things have to be in balance, right? You have to make time to have your mind right, to find time to learn, right? Find time to get some sort of physical activity in and maintain stability. Mm-hmm. Got a friend who's recently been talking to me about, stop looking for balance, because I don't think you really want it anyway.
Right.
And it's hard to find. So maybe work on stability. And that resonated for me. So, but maintaining stability, it looks different for all of us, sure, but finding a way to have that, so that when your mind is right and when you feel decent physically, then you're able to give your best effort at the office and have success, not through, 17 hours in a day, but through a good 11.
Oh, sure. One of the things that sometimes we don't realize, with access to technology, social media, YouTube, internet.
Can we turn that off?
Sure.
Social media, can we just turn it off?
Like, we're eating that, it's mental food. And that's the when people get in the rabbit hole, mm-hmm, overwhelming amount of information is just like eating junk food, tons of junk food every single day. And it's hard to do it because it's there, it's free, it's easy, mm-hmm, and it's tempting because, especially when you're curious, you want to learn more, then you're like, oh, let me think about this. And then you go somewhere else. But there is a point where I feel it sometimes, where I feel like, oh my God, I'm like bloated of trash information in my mind.
Yes.
This is disgusting. So being very careful about what you consume. And, you mentioned the information bias. Sometimes we have a belief on something and we want to keep going. But sometimes that is not the best way to continue our train of thought, because, we need clarity. We need, we need to feel comfortable with our own self in order to do what we need to do. And I think one of the things that I've been thinking about a lot lately is, how to, and I think COVID was a big factor in this for many people, where you're really rethinking what does work mean, mm-hmm, right? And I think by default, because our history in terms of generational, coming from baby boomer generation and some other generations before, work had become the most important thing in people's life. But we're realizing, and we're more conscious today, that work is not who we are. Work is what we do. And sometimes we attach our meaning to work so hard, and sometimes that's good because that's where the motivation comes to do better, to do good things, to be a professional. But sometimes we don't realize the price we're paying for that might be too expensive at the end of the day.
One of the things that I find helpful, I heard this years ago, and I don't remember who said it, but I remember it resonating with me at the time and even today, is to remind yourself to sit and be still, right? To have genuine reflection. It doesn't have to be on a daily basis. It could be on a weekly basis. It could be on a monthly basis. And, we just celebrated the Thanksgiving holiday, and that's one of the times where I sit and be still and I reflect on all of, the things that I should be grateful for. And, just getting deep and real with yourself over, the blessings that you have, right? So for me, one of them was my engagement with Swinerton. It has been a blessing that I've been engaged with this company, and that the company who sold me transparency, who sold me employee ownership, who sold me on having a seat at the table at the highest levels, has come through with all of its promises. And it's not just Jared that's sitting here next to me that does that. It goes from our level all the way up through the CEO, and I'm grateful for that. And sometimes because of what we do, we're so involved with the hard charging and the hustle and the bustle and creating a business and brand awareness and all the things that come with growing a business that we forget to sit and reflect on that. And that's important.
Mm-hmm.
And when you don't have it, and I didn't have it in previous years, it's easy after a couple of years to forget like how valuable that is. But man, when you sit and be still and have some self-reflection, you quickly re-energize over that, what those attributes of a company really do.
Yeah, I'm very guilty of not celebrating my own wins. February is gonna be my 5th year in business.
That's awesome.
And sometimes I see years pass by, and I see I do something and I want to go the next one, the next one, the next one, the next one. And sometimes I put myself in a constant state of frustration because I keep moving the bar and pushing it. But when I realize, or sometimes people look at, what I have been building with my business, with the podcast, with the brand, and people are like, oh my God, look at all those things. And I'm like, wow, I don't see what they're seeing. And
Sure.
I think because I'm not stopping and realizing, like, I don't look back, I look at the future and how do I push myself to that future. But sometimes that is not good because it takes away my energy. Instead of sitting down, reflecting, looking back, valuing, thanking myself for what I've been doing and the value that I've been bringing to my life, my family, and my business community.
Well, on that point, Jack, I'll just take a quick minute and just tell you how much I do admire what you've done in the past 5 years. Like you mentioned in the beginning, you and I have been friends for more than 10 years and in our past lives, and we've always done great things. And what I've seen with you in the last 5 years is admirable, and the podcast success has been great. And I'm super excited for where your next few years are. But I think that your point is well taken, right? It's celebrating what needs to be celebrated.
Yep.
Being still and thinking about what you should be grateful for. Never losing sight of moving the bar, right? As professionals and hard charging individuals, like that would be death to me, right? Like if you're not learning and growing, you're just sitting idle, and who wants to do that? But,
right.
It's important, and it's hard to do. It's easier. It's easier to focus on what's next and tractor grind into the soil and all those things. But man, it is super important. And I think it's the energy that comes from that reflection that actually makes the progression even more meaningful.
That's right. Yeah. Gerald, tell me about the future of the office here. I think you guys have something really good going on. This new office is beautiful. The marketplace is very busy. There are a lot of things happening. How do you see the growth of the offices and how you guys engage with the marketplace and continue growing?
Yeah, I think I'm really excited to be here at this time. I think I think Charlotte had a lot of great things going. I feel like the last 2 years has probably accelerated Charlotte through COVID. I think net migration is accelerated here, and I think it's a really exciting time to be here. It was interesting moving from Denver. The stories about there's no homes on the market and the traffic is rough, and I got here and didn't experience either. But it's all about perspective, right? And so I think that there's such a great opportunity for Charlotte to continue to grow in a really healthy and intentional way, and I'm excited to be here for that, right? And I think that it seems like especially the contracting landscape here is changing quickly, and we're really excited about that. I think that we're here at the right time to bring that brand of partnership and transparency that we commit to. I'm aware that we're not the only ones that commit to that in the interview. We're going to deliver.
Yeah.
And so I hope that can differentiate us and set us up to be that trusted partner that we're headed for. But we've really designed this office to accommodate. It's my hope that we'll be here for several years. And really, we tried to design, a bunch of non-addressed space, right? We're sitting in one of the booths that, we want people to be able to come in from out of town for the day. You're welcome to be here anytime, right? Or we have other industry friends, but just space that people can just be and work for the day and hit the coffee machine and just have an inviting place to set up and collaborate. And with the hope that will help us extend the life of this space, right? And over time, it'll be pretty efficient. We're already out of offices and about out of our sit stand area, so we'll be calling our friends at CBI here in a minute to order some more. But it's been fun to build something with a broader vision, right? I had somebody ask me the other day if this was a showroom or our office, and I'm like, yes, it is.
That's a compliment.
Yeah. Big time. Yeah.
But
How about you, Jason? What do you think about is going to be the near future of the office, and also I'd like you to talk about your involvement with the office project, because I hear you using architect words like bringing the scale down.
Yeah. Well, I mean, sometimes I pick up a nugget here and there from my design professionals, but no, I mean, look, I think the space is reflective of our culture, right? It's open, it's inviting. We recently had a series of guests come through the office, and the recurring theme really was that there was two: it was energetic and happy, right? I mean, if you can hear those words from people that are coming in, that are a fresh set of eyes, not only on the office physical nature, but the office's feel from the employees and the partners, like, to me, that's huge. That's huge.
Yeah, that's amazing. Awesome.
So, it's my hope is that, Jared said a few years, I think that, yes, we're certainly growing at an exponential rate, and it's healthy growth, and it's strategic growth. And we take a lot of time to reflect on that as partners to see what is that fine line of healthy versus unhealthy, and maintaining the culture that we have. But certainly there's room here to grow, and we're super happy with our investment in the west side of Charlotte, which is growing leaps and bounds. There's developers that are pumping a bunch of money into land acquisitions, and we just want to be known as the local contractor that has outstanding service, that strives to deliver a product that promotes negotiated long-term relationships for years to come. And whether we're in this physical office for 5, 6, 7 years, or if we decide to, buy some land and build and develop and continue our craft services and self-perform operations as part of that, we're all for it. But I'm super stoked about the energy behind the community. Not only just here too, Raleigh is the same thing, right? So we also oversee the Raleigh office, and we've got a great group of folks up there that's led by a gentleman by the name of Kyle Bailey, and he's certainly doing everything he can to promote that market. But we recognize that part of our strategy and growth is in that market as well, and where that lends itself in the next couple of years is yet to be seen. But we have a really good idea of how we're going to get to where we need to get to in that market as well. And it goes back to our employees, our partners, and just open and honest transparency.
Awesome. Well, guys, thank you so much for your time. I'm very inspired and energized by your story. I think you guys are doing great things, and can't wait to see what's going to happen in the next few years, and looking forward to staying in touch.
Thanks, Jack.
Thanks, Jack.
Thanks. Thank you for listening to the Power of Design podcast. Please remember to subscribe, rate, and review if you like this content. And find us online at thepowerofdesignpodcast.com. I invite you to join my mission to become a better version of yourself through the power of design.